Chapter 18. Rayford did not see himself as a womanizer. Except for his Christmas party indiscretion a few years before, he had never been unfaithful to Irene, though he had to admit that if she had had a necking session like the one he'd had, only technicalities would keep him from calling it adultery. His conscience had bothered him so since that time that he had sincerely gotten his act together. Rayford wasn't blind. He could tell when women found him attractive. But the bad taste had lingered for so long after that holiday dalliance that he had been able to play dumb and deflect flirtatious advances. Now he wasn't so sure. Hattie Durham had been a teenager when she became a PanCon flight attendant, and any heterosexual man with eyes agreed she was the total package. Head to toe, side to side, hair, face, and personality, she quickly became every passenger's favorite attendant and every crew member's dream. She could be ditzy, but Rayford was convinced that was an act designed to manipulate. Interestingly, unless she was being reprimanded, which was rare as she seemed to love her job enough to be conscientious, she never played that game with him. She plainly looked up to Rayford, and maybe he was being naive, but it seemed genuine, not as if she was just flattering him because he was the captain. Rayford was able to talk himself out of any less than honorable intentions by reminding himself how young she was. She had senior flight attendant written all over her, though it would be a few years before she reached that status. Other attendants, particularly women, acted less than impressed with her at first, jealousy, Rayford decided, but she soon won over even them. Her superiors seemed to look for minor offenses, but she was so good that they had trouble finding fault. Rayford simply liked thinking about her, and he was always pleased when he saw her name on the crew list. He was heading for the parking garage at O'Hare one evening when he heard heels approaching quickly from behind. "You live in Mount Prospect, don't you, Captain?" He turned, still moving. "I do, Hattie. Why?" "You know I'm not far away, in Des Plaines. Just got a call that my roommate can't pick me up, and I hate to take public transportation at night. Would you mind?" "Of course not." Hattie seemed to chatter nervously as they headed toward Des Plaines. It was all Rayford could do to keep his eyes on the road. He was certain he had never had as beautiful a woman in such close proximity. He called Irene. "I'm going to be a few minutes on running a stranded teammate to her place in Des Plaines." When he pulled up in front of Hattie's condo, Rayford started to get out. "No need," Hattie said. "If you'll just wait to be sure I get inside before the boogeyman gets me, that will be fine." She took his hand in both of hers. "I really appreciate this, Captain. You're a doll." At home a few minutes later, Irene said, "So who was the stranded flight attendant?" "That teenager with the funny name. I've told you about her." "Hattie the Ditz?" Irene said. "That's the one." "Lock her keys in the car?" "Wouldn't put it past her." Rayford foresaw nothing untoward with Hattie Durham in the future, but he sure liked remembering her perched in the passenger seat right beside him. Dizzy Rowland, executive editor of the Boston Globe, welcomed Cameron into his spacious office and introduced him to 3 of his top people, 2 men and a woman. Their names flew past Cameron, and he would have failed a quiz, but they all certainly looked the part. In banquet finery and at ease in the presence of the big boss, they exuded confidence and friendliness. All had nice things to say about Cameron's work. Rowland pointed to a chair at a conference table away from his desk, and the 5 of them sat, 4 staring at Cameron. He finally felt conspicuous in his ill-fitting tux, and he was tempted to explain it. "I just wanted a few minutes," Mr. Rowland said. "First, congratulations on your Pulitzer nomination and this award, not to mention your classwork. My spies at Princeton tell me you're a Dean's List student." "Far from straight A's," Cameron said, "but I do feel obligated to give it all I've got." "Admirable, laudable. May I ask your career goal?" "Global Weekly," Cameron said. "Wow," Roland said. "You didn't even have to think about that." Cameron cocked his head. "It's been my dream for years." Roland sat back and seemed to study him, smiling. Cameron's gaze darted at the others, who appeared bemused. Was admitting that lofty goal exposing himself as a rube, a dreamer? Well, the man had asked. "You're sitting in the company of 4 career newspaper people," Roland said. "Journalists, curious people. It wouldn't surprise me if one of them had a question." They all seemed to speak at once, but the woman prevailed. "Just wondering," she said. "Did you feel a check at all in your mind, blurting your magazine dream to a newspaper executive?" Cameron thrust out his lower lip. "I guess I didn't. Should I have? Was that politically incorrect, impertinent, rude?" The rest laughed. "It was commendable," Roland said. "A lot of people would have worried more about diplomacy." "Sorry," Cameron said. "I wasn't thinking. I certainly didn't mean to offend." "Offend?" the woman said. "I found it refreshing. A little naive, perhaps, but refreshing." "Naive?" "Let me put it to you this way," she said. "A lot of our colleagues, even at our level, apply to the news magazines at least once a year, trying to get out of the daily grind." "And into the weekly grind," one of the men said, and they all laughed again. "The competition for jobs at GW, Time, Newsweek, and U.S. News is fierce. Your career goal is neither a surprise or unique, just lofty." Cameron didn't know what to say. The Ivy League, Princeton in particular, was way past where he should have looked for college, too. He wasn't about to give up a dream because it looked unlikely. He wanted to live an unlikely life. "Did you wonder what I wanted to see you about, Mr. Williams?" Roland said. "Well, sure. Or did you just think it was to meet you and congratulate you?" "I didn't have any idea." "That's refreshing, too," Roland said. "I confess an ulterior motive. We want to hire you." Cameron wondered where his mind had been. Why was this such a surprise? He simply hadn't considered it. "Lest you think we say this to all the award winners," the woman said. "We don't. Of this year's crop, you are the only one." "Well," Cameron said, suddenly feeling like an inarticulate bumbler. "Wow, thanks. I had been hoping for a good internship." "We're not talking about an internship, Mr. Williams," Roland said. "For the rest of your senior year, you would remain on the staff of the student paper and continue stringing for the local paper, but you would make yourself available for the occasional assignment from us, should a regional story hit in your area." "Sure, I can do that. But upon graduation, maybe after a week or two to get your affairs in order, we would expect you to relocate here for a full-time reporting position." "Full-time?" "You are a gifted young man, Mr. Williams. We believe you have the stuff of a good newspaper man. Here you'll get a chance to find out if we're right. You'll get grunt work and have a deadline every day. This kind of work separates the pros from the dilettantes." "And," the woman said, "the Global Weekly wannabes from the real deals." Taking a solitary pre-dawn stroll with his bodyguards at a discreet distance, Nikolai allowed Leon Fortunato's strange counsel to dance in his mind. Long a sports fan, Nikolai had always been entertained by the braggadocios, especially those who backed up their boasts. He agreed with the adage, "It's not bragging if you can do it." The strutting confidence of young physical geniuses inspired Nikolai, and he wanted that same image as a politician and leader. But if Leon was right, the populace would soon tire of a self-promoter, a cocky show-off. Where did one go for examples of humility or to practice the art? One thing was certain. If Nikolai was going to appear humble, it would be more than art. It would be an act. Cameron made his way onto the snowy street in front of the Globe building, not knowing how to feel. He was chagrined at his starry-eyed dream of landing even an internship with Global Weekly, and high on the rush of being offered a job with the Globe. He couldn't wait to tell Dirk, let alone his family, particularly his mother. The Volvo was idling, and while huge soft flakes lit on the car, they melted quickly. He opened the door to greet Dirk, but he wasn't there. He couldn't be far. He wouldn't leave an unlocked car on a busy street. Cameron stood and turned to look, just in time to take a huge snowball in the chest that exploded all over his face and in his hair. Dirk came staggering across the street, cackling so loud that Cameron feared he would pass out. Cameron knelt and scooped snow he quickly formed into a ball, and before Dirk could dodge him, he fired away. Dirk ducked, and it splatted atop his head. "Truce," Cameron called out. "We've got to get going, and I have news." They brushed off and climbed into the car. Cameron had never understood this about himself, but besides loving storms, he didn't mind driving in them. They could be scary, but he figured he'd drive for as long as he could and get as far as he could and try to outlast the blizzard. Being in a warm car with a full tank and a good friend, well, what could be better than that? Getting through the city and onto I-90 took just a few minutes, and while traffic was slow, the plows seemed to be keeping up with the snowfall. At the first toll booth, the attendant said, "How far are you going?" "Jersey." "Good luck. You got chains?" "Do I need 'em?" "You might the farther you go south. Don't be a hero." A couple of hours later, it was well past midnight, and Cameron was merging onto I-84. At first, it looked clearer, and the traffic was lighter, so he hoped to make up some time. Dirk had been holding forth on conspiracy theories the whole way, and when Cameron could concentrate, he found his friend amusing. "I didn't know the British Isles produced conspiracy theorists too," he said. "I thought those Illuminati and Bilderberger and Trilateral Commission freaks were all stateside." "You don't believe in any of that?" Dirk said. "If you'd worked under Joshua Todd Cothran at the Exchange, you might change your tune." "Or exchange it." "Hilarious. Seriously, Dirk, you believe all that?" "I don't know what to think, but it makes a lot of sense to me. Jonathan Stonegal is a secret member of a lot of organizations, and when he and Todd Cothran and a bunch of other muckety-mucks are rumored to be meeting, major financial decisions follow that affect the whole world. Glad I'm not in economics." "Don't kid yourself, Cam. We're all in economics. It's all about economics. You'd think a journalist would know that. Want to find the source of change, the source of trouble, the source of anything? Follow the money."